Hello, and welcome. Before we begin tonight's journey into the past, take just a moment to tap the like button and comment down below where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see where in the world our listeners are tuning in. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let's drift back almost 2,000 years to the heart of the ancient Roman world, a place where marble temples glowed in the moonlight and the soft trickle of fountains filled the night air. Close your eyes and imagine yourself walking through Rome at night. The bustle of the day has faded, market stalls are closing, the sounds of laughter and music grow distant, and the stars emerge above the tiled rooftops. Tonight, we'll explore how the Romans rested, what they dreamed, and what life after sunset was truly like. The city of Rome never fully slept. Even in the still of night, lanterns flickered softly in taverns along the narrow streets, casting warm, dancing shadows on stone walls. Watchmen, cloaked in dark tunics, patrolled the cobblestones with steady footsteps, their calls echoing faintly in the quiet air. The distant splash of fountains and the soft murmur of the Tiber River reminded all who wandered that life, even in slumber, continued quietly in the city. For most citizens, however, night was a time to seek rest. For the wealthy, the evening might begin in a grand private villa, with towering marble columns rising toward painted ceilings and frescoed walls depicting gods, gardens, and faraway lands. Servants moved silently through the halls, carrying oil lamps in delicate holders that bathed the rooms in a soft, golden glow. The aroma of burning olive oil mingled with faint traces of incense, while the hush of indoor fountains added a gentle rhythm to the night. In their chambers, richly adorned beds, sometimes draped with fine linens or wool blankets, awaited, and the wealthy might spend hours reading scrolls, writing letters, or quietly conversing, before finally drifting into slumber. For the poor, the night unfolded very differently. They lived in crowded insulae, tall apartment buildings where wooden beams groaned and narrow staircases creaked under every footstep. Shadows stretched across the walls as families shared small rooms, and voices from neighboring apartments carried clearly through thin walls. The smell of cooking fires lingered late into the evening, and the occasional bark of a dog or the clatter of a cart passing on the street below reminded them that the city's pulse never fully faded. For them, night was less a time of leisure and more a precious opportunity for rest, snatched wherever comfort could be found. The contrast between rich and poor in Rome was as wide as the marble streets themselves, spanning from luxurious villas with private courtyards to crowded apartments stacked high above noisy thoroughfares. And nowhere was this contrast more vivid than in the way the citizens of Rome closed their eyes each night, preparing for rest in worlds so different, yet united by the same city lights, the same moon overhead, and the same silent stars watching above. For most Romans, night was a time to rest, though the ways they found comfort varied as widely as their wealth. The wealthy might retreat to grand villas, tucked away from the bustle, with marble floors that reflected the soft glow of oil lamps and painted walls depicting gods, heroes, and lush gardens that seemed almost alive in the flickering light. Servants would move silently through the halls, carrying delicate lamps or trays of warm wine for those unable to sleep. Some of the more eccentric patricians even believed in dream whisperers, mysterious figures said to walk through the villa in the quiet hours, whispering guidance or warnings to those lucky or unlucky enough to hear them. It was said that one such whisperer once warned a young Roman noblewoman that she would dream of a swan that night, and she did, gracefully gliding across her ceiling fresco, a vision so vivid she woke believing it had flown into her chamber. For the poor, life at night was far less enchanted. They lived in crowded insulae, where wooden beams groaned under the weight of many families, and the thin walls seemed almost to whisper secrets of those living beside you. Voices carried, mingling with the sound of distant carts, barking dogs, and occasionally the clink of a late-night tavern closing its doors. Many children would fall asleep, listening to stories passed down from their parents, tales of ancient heroes, mischievous spirits, or the Manes, the wandering spirits of ancestors who watched over the city from shadowed corners. Sometimes a child would wake, convinced they had glimpsed a shadow at the window, only to be reassured that it was merely a stray cat, or perhaps the ghost of a long-forgotten baker roaming the alleys in search of a warm hearth. Even the streets themselves were full of stories. A lone baker might finish his late-night rounds, swearing he saw a shadowy figure dancing among the market stalls, and a group of sailors would nod knowingly, claiming it was the ghost of a shipwrecked trader who loved moonlight too much to rest. Dogs barked in the distance, cats prowled silently, and the fountains gurgled, all combining into a nocturnal symphony unique to Rome. And yet, amid the tales, the charms, and the whispered warnings, there was a kind of magic in the night. From marble villas to crowded apartments, Romans shared the same sky overhead, the same silver glow of the moon upon rooftops, and the same quiet wonder of drifting into dreams, whether lulled by the trickle of fountains, the crackle of fire, or stories whispered through walls. All Romans, rich and poor alike, were connected by the city's rhythms, its shadows, and the mysteries that walked with them in the night. Some evenings, it was said, if you walked quietly along the forum, you might glimpse a senator in a toga, pacing as if still deep in debate, or hear the laughter of a long-dead baker teasing the children of the streets. And if you were very still, very quiet, perhaps even you could catch a glimpse of Caelestis dancing among the columns, reminding the city that sleep is not merely rest, but a doorway into imagination, legend, and the timeless heartbeat of Rome itself. As night deepened over Rome, the wealthy retreated to their private villas, tucked away from the lively streets and bustling markets. Tall columns framed open courtyards, and frescoed walls glowed softly in the golden light of oil lamps, casting elongated, flickering shadows that seemed almost alive. In these serene spaces, servants moved with quiet precision, carrying trays of spiced wine, folded linens, and tiny clay lamps whose flames danced like gentle stars across the marble floors. The rooms themselves were rich with detail. Beds, sometimes low wooden frames, called lecti, were draped with layers of soft wool, linen, and sometimes delicate silk. Feather-stuffed pillows provided lofty comfort, while blankets emitted a faint scent of lavender or rosemary, left by careful hands as a charm to ensure a restful night. It was believed by some that certain nights were more potent than others, that the very position of the stars could summon dreams or portend strange omens. One popular superstition held that placing a small figurine of Somnus, the god of sleep, near your pillow could guide the mind toward pleasant visions. Another told that spilling a drop of wine on your bedside floor would invite the spirits of ancestors to visit you, bringing protection and guidance through the night and in the quietest hours. Some Romans claimed to hear whispers in the hallways, voices not of servants, but of past family members, gently reminding them of their duties, their lineage, or sometimes simply telling silly, cryptic jokes meant only to amuse the sleeping. Imagine a young Roman noblewoman lying in her cubicula, her eyes tracing the painted ceiling, depicting a garden where nymphs danced among fountains. A breeze slips through an open window, carrying the soft scent of blooming oleander from the villa's courtyard. She reaches for a small charm beneath her pillow, a tiny bronze figurine of Janus, the god of beginnings and transitions, and holds it briefly, believing it will ward off nightmares. Outside, a servant tiptoes across the marble floor, carefully adjusting the flickering flame of a lamp so that it doesn't cast shadows too harsh or too dim. And somewhere beyond the villa walls, a soft laugh echoes, perhaps the spirit of a mischievous child from a century past, or the playful trick of Celestis, a legendary figure said to wander the night, teasing those awake while leaving the sleeping untouched. Evenings for the wealthy could be long and winding. Some would stay awake, reading scrolls, listening to music from a small lyre, or engaging in quiet conversation about philosophy, poetry, or politics. On certain nights, a nobleman might place a tiny bowl of water by his bedside, murmuring a prayer to the mains, believing that the spirits of his ancestors would drink from it and bless him with serene dreams. Others would light a special incense, letting the smoke drift lazily across the room, curling around statues of household gods or busts of revered ancestors. It was said that on nights when the incense burned in a perfect spiral, the sleeper might catch glimpses of fantastical visions, dancing animals, radiant lights, or even glimpses of Rome as it might appear centuries in the future. Some playful tales suggested that wealthy Romans even held dream contests in secret. Two cousins might lie in adjacent cubicula, sharing stories and attempting to influence each other's dreams through whispered suggestions. Dream of golden apples tonight, one would say softly. See the garden of Minerva in your sleep, another would murmur. And when morning came, they would compare visions, laughing or marveling at what their minds had conjured. The sounds of the villa itself contributed to the ambiance. A fountain gurgled quietly in the central courtyard, The faint scratching of a cat across the roof tiles blended with the distant clatter of a cart on the cobblestones below. Occasionally, a servant might step too loudly and freeze, worried that they had disturbed the delicate balance of sleep. And all the while, the moonlight poured through open windows, illuminating painted frescoes where gods, nymphs, and ancestors alike seemed to watch over the night. For the wealthy, sleep was an experience, both physical and spiritual. It was not merely rest, but a ritual infused with superstition, imagination, and a careful orchestration of comfort. Every scent, every flicker of flame, every charm placed just so, contributed to the sense that they were not alone in their sleep, that the villa, the spirits, and even the city of Rome itself conspired to cradle them gently into dreams. One story told among the wealthy was that of Lucius, a patrician who could not sleep. For weeks, he tossed and turned, troubled by vivid dreams of stormy seas and collapsing temples. Fearing the dreams were omens, he invited a priest of Somnus to his villa. The priest advised him to place a silver mirror beside his bed, polished so brightly that it caught even the faintest glow of the moon. He told Lucius that whatever dreams he saw reflected in the mirror would be reversed, turning storms into calm waters and ruins into flourishing gardens. That night, Lucius lay awake, staring at the shining disk beside him. The moonlight shimmered across its surface, and slowly his eyes grew heavy. He dreamed of the same stormy seas, but this time the waves calmed into gentle ripples, carrying ships safely to shore. The crumbling temples rebuilt themselves, pillars standing taller than before, bathed in golden light. When he awoke, Lucius claimed that not only had his dreams changed, but his fortune too. A lawsuit he had feared was settled in his favor. A friend he thought lost returned to him, and his harvest flourished more richly than ever. Since then, it was whispered among the noble classes that placing a polished mirror by the bedside might turn misfortune into blessing and nightmares into visions worth cherishing. As they finally surrendered to slumber, it was said that sometimes, if one listened closely, the laughter of long-dead ancestors could be heard mingling with a soft rustle of linens, and perhaps a playful spirit like Hylestis would skip across the marble floors, unseen, leaving only a trace of warmth in the air, a subtle reminder that even in the still of night, Rome was alive with magic, legend, and the eternal rhythm of dreams. While the wealthy drifted into slumber on feathered pillows in marble villas, the poor of Rome found rest in humbler, noisier surroundings. Most lived in insulae, crowded apartment blocks of timber and brick, some rising 5 or 6 stories high, swaying gently with every gust of wind. The walls were thin, so thin that neighbors could hear each other's laughter, arguments, lullabies, and even the creak of wooden frames as families settled down to sleep. A single lamp might light a whole room, its flame trembling in the draught from a cracked shutter. casting shadows that stretched like tall giants across peeling plaster walls. Beds were often nothing more than straw mats or wooden planks, with worn wool blankets passed down through generations. In the summer, entire families might sleep together in a single space, while in the winter they huddled close, breath forming tiny clouds in the chill night air. The scent of smoke from the communal hearths clung to their clothes and hair, mingling with the aroma of baked bread, spilled wine, and the faint, ever-present dust of the city. And yet, for all its roughness, there was comfort, too. Mothers and fathers told stories to quiet restless children, stories meant both to entertain and to protect. One common tale warned of the Striga, a night witch said to slip through open windows, stealing the breath of children who failed to sleep. To ward her off, parents would hang sprigs of garlic or rosemary above the bed, believing the strong scent would drive her away. Children, wide-eyed, would clutch their blankets tightly, pretending bravery, but secretly comforted by the protection of their charms. Other stories were gentler. A popular fable spoke of a humble cobbler who was so kind in life that when he died, the gods granted him the power to walk the alleys at night, fixing the shoes of poor children as they slept. Parents would tell their little ones, "If you hear soft tapping at night, don't be afraid. It's the cobbler at work, making sure your shoes will carry you safely tomorrow." Superstitions thrived in these crowded quarters. It was said that leaving a small crust of bread by the window would keep away wandering spirits of the hungry dead. Others whispered that if you dreamed of fire, you must spit 3 times upon waking, lest your house catch flame before the next new moon. And some believed that a bowl of water placed by the door could collect bad dreams, drawing them out of the body like smoke drifting into the night. Children, drowsy and curious, would listen as their parents spun tales of the lairs, the household spirits said to guard each family. Though their homes were small, they believed these invisible protectors stood watch in the corners of the room, guiding them into dreams and keeping misfortune at bay. Sometimes a child would wake in the night and swear they had seen a faint glowing figure by the hearth, only to be reassured that it was Alar, checking to see if the family slept soundly. Of course, not every noise was explained so kindly. The creak of beams in the high wooden apartments, the scurry of rats in the dark corners, or the sudden shout of a drunkard on the street below could startle the light sleepers of the insula. Some believed these noises were omens. A beam that groaned too loudly foretold illness. A rat running across your floor meant unexpected visitors, and a drunken voice echoing beneath your window signaled that good fortune or trouble was soon to arrive, depending on how the sound carried. Despite the hardship, there was also laughter in the night. It was common for neighbors to call softly through the thin walls, sharing jokes or whispering complaints about the day's work. Children in one family might giggle as they tried to trick the children next door, scraping a stick along the wall and pretending it was the Striga's fingernails. The laughter that followed, muffled by tired parents shushing them, was part of the rhythm of life in the poor quarters of Rome. Even the dreams of the poor carried stories. Some believed that dreams of water meant money would soon arrive, while dreams of climbing meant you would rise in fortune. But dreams of falling were feared, for they were thought to mean that poverty would cling tighter in the days ahead. It was not unusual for a father to wake in the night, sitting upright on his straw mattress, and murmur quietly to his wife about what visions had visited him in sleep. She might nod knowingly, then whisper her own dream, the two of them weaving meaning from the night's images, as naturally as they might weave a basket or mend a garment. One vignette tells of a young boy named Marcus living with his mother and sisters in a cramped upper room of an insula. On one particularly cold night, he dreamed that he was walking through a field of wheat, golden and endless. When he awoke, his mother told him this was a blessing from Ceres, the goddess of grain, a promise that their hunger would be eased. And indeed, the very next day, a baker in the neighborhood left a small loaf of bread on their doorstep. Whether by chance, charity, or divine intervention, for years after, Marcus believed that dreams carried power, and he told his children and grandchildren to listen carefully to the stories whispered by sleep. The poor might not have had silk sheets or marble floors, but they had stories, superstitions, laughter, and love. In their crowded rooms, they found warmth in one another's presence and meaning in the rhythms of their nightly rituals. Theirs was a sleep not of luxury, but of resilience, imagination, and the quiet strength to rise again with the morning sun. And so, while the wealthy drifted into dreams under frescoed ceilings, the poor of Rome found their own kind of rest, woven not from silk, but from whispered tales, the warmth of shared blankets, and the unseen guardians who, they believed, kept watch over even the humblest of sleepers. Sleep in ancient Rome was rarely one long, unbroken stretch. Instead, it often came in segments, woven into the rhythm of the day and night. The city itself seemed to breathe with its citizens, quieting as dusk fell, stirring again at midnight, then returning to silence until dawn. For many Romans, the night was divided into two sleeps, the primum somnum, the first sleep, and the secundus somnus, the second sleep. Between the two, there was often a period of wakefulness, a quiet interlude where dreams still clung like cobwebs, and the mind felt half in this world and half in another. During this midnight interval, Some families lit small lamps and whispered prayers to household gods. Others used the time to share secrets, to nurse children who had stirred, or to tend small fires so they would not die out before morning. It was said that if you woke and remained still, you might hear the voices of spirits drifting in the air, perhaps ancestors offering guidance, perhaps mischief makers like the playful Caelestis, lurking just outside the window, daring the brave to peek. The wealthy often used this waking hour for reflection. A senator might rise quietly from his couch, wrap himself in a woolen cloak, and pace the mosaic floor of his chamber. By lamplight, he would unroll a scroll of poetry or philosophy, reading in the hush of the night when distractions were few. There are tales of men who swore they found their greatest ideas not in the bustle of the forum, but in this stillness between sleeps, when the city murmured faintly and the stars hung like silver coins in the heavens. The poor used the interval differently. In cramped insulae, a mother might mend torn clothing by lamplight, or whisper stories to restless children. A father might step outside briefly into the narrow alleyway, cool night air brushing his face, and share a quiet word with a neighbor who, by chance, was also awake. Sometimes these chance meetings forged bonds stronger than those made in daylight. One story tells of two neighbors in the Subura district who, waking at the same hour each night, began to share bread and wine in silence. Years later, when fire swept through their street, they saved each other's families first, claiming that it was their midnight vigils that had bound them like brothers. Superstitions surrounded these waking hours. It was said that if you dreamed vividly during the first sleep, the dream was a message from the gods. But if the dream came during the second, it was only a trick of the stomach, a shadow of whatever food or drink you had consumed the night before. Others believed that to wake at midnight was dangerous, for it was the hour when the boundary between worlds grew thin. Children were told, never look into a mirror if you wake at midnight, for you might see not your own reflection, but the face of a spirit peering back. Daily rhythms were equally important. Romans did not expect to sleep all night and remain fully alert all day. The wealthy often indulged in the meridiatio, a midday nap after lunch. In shaded gardens or cool atriums, they would recline on couches as fountains trickled nearby, closing their eyes while cicadas sang in the heat. Some even claimed that dreams at midday were more truthful than those at night, for they came while the sun still shone, and the gods could more easily send visions down through the bright sky. The poor, too, snatched naps when they could. A laborer might steal a moment beneath the awning of a market stall, or rest against the wall of a bathhouse during a break. Children often curled up on mats in the shade, falling into quick, heavy slumber as their parents watched over them. It was said that if a child smiled in their nap, the household spirits were tickling them with blessings. And then there were the night wanderers. Some Romans confessed they could not sleep long, their bodies restless, even in comfort. These men and women would roam the villa halls or city streets, listening to the whispers of the night. Legends grew around such figures. People who claimed to see omens written in the stars, or to hear music drifting from temples long after the priests had gone. One tale tells of a woman who woke each night at the same hour to pour water into her courtyard fountain. She believed that doing so kept the goddess Luna, the moon, from fading. And so, when neighbors saw the moon shine especially brightly, they credited her devotion, imagining her as Luna's quiet handmaiden in the silence of Rome. Patterns of sleep were not just about when Romans closed their eyes. They were about the relationship between people, gods, and the unseen. Sleep was a rhythm, a ritual, a space where daily life and the divine touched. In the quiet hours between dusk and dawn, Rome's citizens, rich and poor alike, moved through a cycle of dreams, wakefulness, and dreams again, believing that every moment of rest was part of a greater pattern woven by fate. In Ostia, the busy port of Rome, there lived a fisherman named Gaius. He was poor, rising before dawn to cast his nets into the sea. But Gaius had a strange habit. He always woke in the dead of night, between his first and second sleep. Each night, he would step outside his hut, the salt air clinging to his skin, and sit by the water with his eyes half closed. He claimed that Neptune himself whispered to him in these hours, guiding him toward where the fish would be most plentiful come morning. Neighbors laughed, calling it superstition, but they could not deny that Gaius's nets were always fuller than theirs. One night, in the hush between sleeps, Gaius dreamed of a great silver fish with scales like moonlight. The fish spoke, "Wake, fisherman, cast your net not into the sea, but into the river mouth." Gaius startled awake, heart pounding. Trusting the dream, he rose and hurried barefoot to the river bank, where the Tiber met the sea. There, under the stars, he cast his net once. When he pulled it back, it was heavy, so heavy he feared the ropes might snap. Inside were fish of every kind, enough to feed his family for a month. Word of this miracle catch spread quickly. Some said it was proof that dreams between first and second sleep carried the voice of the gods. Others whispered that Gaius had been visited not by Neptune, but by the restless souls of drowned sailors, guiding him in gratitude for the offerings he left at the water's edge. From then on, parents told their children, "If you wake in the middle of the night, listen well. It may be the hour when dreams step into the world, and the gods cast their nets for us." And so, whether it was the senator pacing by lamplight, the mother whispering tales in a crowded room, or the wanderer pouring water beneath the stars, the patterns of Roman sleep were never just about closing one's eyes. They were a dance with shadows, a conversation with gods, and a nightly reminder that even in rest, Rome was alive. The city of Rome never truly belonged to the sun alone. When daylight faded and the forum quieted, another Rome stirred awake, a Rome of torchlight, whispers, and shadows. The stone streets still held the day's warmth, but the air cooled, carrying with it the mingled scents of olive oil, smoke, and damp stone. For the wealthy, night might mean reclining once more, lingering over wine, poetry, or private music. But for many, the Roman night was alive with sound, the clatter of taverns, spilling laughter and arguments into the street, the bray of donkeys carting goods by moonlight, or the calls of street vendors who preferred to sell their wares in the cool dark. Fountains gurgled at crossroads, reflecting the glow of oil lamps that swung from doorways. Cats slinked between amphorae and baskets, chasing after scraps, while dogs barked at shadows, ever watchful. Night did not silence Rome, it transformed it. At every hour, watchmen paced with wooden staves and iron lanterns. Their job was not only to guard, but to warn. A careless spark could set an entire insula aflame, and so they sniffed the air for smoke, listening for shouts of alarm. Romans feared fire more than thieves, for fire respected no class, consuming noble villas and poor tenements alike. Superstition clung to the watchmen themselves. It was said that if a watchman's lamp flickered out on its own, without wind or hand, the spirit of the street demanded an offering, a coin tossed onto the paving stones, lest misfortune follow. Some whispered that shadows clung to them longer than to other men, as if the night itself claimed them for its own. Step into a Roman tavern at night, and you'd find a place alive, with voices, dice clattering across worn wooden tables, and the smell of sour wine mixed with spiced meats. Sailors boasted of their journeys, soldiers gambled away their pay, and merchants struck bargains by lamplight. In the corners, old men told stories of emperors long dead or of ghosts said to wander the aqueducts. Children, peeking in from the street, swore they heard laughter when no mouths moved, or saw shadows move where no man stood. One tale spoke of a tavern keeper who mixed his wine too thin. Angry patrons cursed him, and not long after, his cellar filled with rats, no matter how many he killed. They returned each night, gnawing the casks. An old woman told him it was no ordinary infestation, but a punishment from Bacchus himself. Only when the man poured a full amphora of pure, strong wine onto the ground in offering did the rats vanish, never to return. Romans believed the crossroads at night were not simply meeting places of roads, but of worlds. Lamps flickered strangely there, and offerings of bread, cheese, or small cakes were left to appease the spirits. Dogs barked at shadows that men could not see, and mothers warned their children never to linger too long where three streets met after sundown. Stories spread of travelers who heard their names whispered at the crossroads, though no living soul stood near. Some claimed these were the voices of the Lares Compitales, guardian spirits of the neighborhood, testing the respect of mortals. Ignore the whisper, and one risked bad luck. Answer it, and one risked far worse. In one quarter of Rome, it was said the baker's daughter often snuck out at night to deliver loaves to the poor. One evening, she passed a crossroads where the lamps burned low. A voice called her name, soft as a sigh. She froze, remembering her mother's warnings. She set one loaf upon the stones and hurried away without answering. The next morning, when she opened her basket, she found a coin of silver lying atop the bread, far more than she would have earned in a week. From then on, people whispered that generosity at night was never unseen, and that the spirits of Rome rewarded kindness in their own ways. For Romans, the night was filled with omens. An owl hooting atop a roof was considered dire, a herald of illness or death. A dream dreamt after midnight was thought truer than one dreamt before, and some swore that if you walked the streets too late, you might catch sight of the lemures, restless spirits, drifting between doorways, muttering in voices that sounded like the wind. But not all tales were dark. Lovers believed that walking together beneath the full moon blessed their union, and that placing a sprig of laurel under the pillow would invite sweet dreams. Children were told that the moon goddess Luna walked the skies each night, watching over their rest, brushing away nightmares with her silver light. The rhythm of Rome at night was uneven. Some streets bustled with noise and laughter. Others lay silent, shadowed by tall insulae that blotted out the moon. One moment you might pass a doorway alive with song, the next a silent alley where only the drip of water and the scurry of rats kept company. They say that in the quieter hours before dawn, when the baths of the Forum stood empty and cold, a pale figure wandered among the marble pools. The story begins with Aulus, a young scribe who often worked late by lamplight. One evening, after delivering a scroll, he decided to bathe before going home. The night was still, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone. He slipped into the frigidarium, the cold pool, and let the water wash away the dust of the day. But when he opened his eyes, he was not alone. Across the water, a man stood, tall, his skin pale as moonlight, his toga wet, though no sound of footsteps had touched the floor. His eyes were dark hollows, and his lips moved soundlessly. Aulus froze, unable to call out. The figure raised a hand and pointed, not at Aulus, but at the doorway. Terrified, Aulus fled into the street, water streaming from his clothes. Only when he reached the safety of his insula did he realize the baths had been closed that night for repairs. The door he claimed to enter through had been bolted shut hours before. Word spread, and soon the people whispered that the baths were haunted by the ghost of a senator who had drowned there decades earlier, struck down not by accident, but by betrayal. Servants spoke of hearing whispers echo in the steam rooms, and of phantom footsteps splashing in pools long drained. Even years later, mothers warned their children, do not linger near the forum baths after dark. Some spirits seek warmth they will never again feel, and they will follow you home if you give them your gaze. To walk Rome at night was to feel both fear and wonder, the thrill of the city alive in its secrets. People worked, prayed, and sinned under the same stars. The poor sought rest, the wealthy sought entertainment, and all the while, Rome itself seemed to breathe, its heart beating beneath the moonlight. To the Romans, dreams were never just dreams. They were windows into the unseen, whispers from the gods, or warnings from restless spirits. Night was not a blank canvas of sleep, but a realm where visions carried weight, shaping choices in the waking world. The humblest laborer and the most powerful senator alike might pause at dawn to consider, what did my dream mean? Romans believed that the boundary between the living and the divine was thinnest in dreams. The god Somnus, ruler of sleep, was said to dwell in a dark, silent cave where poppies grew thick and streams of lethe water ran quietly. From his cavern, he released dreams into the world, like birds through an open door. Some dreams were thought to be mere shadows, figments born of the stomach or of wine, but others, vivid, strange, or lingering, were treated as messages. The educated might consult a dream interpreter, flipping through dream books filled with symbols and their meanings. To dream of water meant fortune. To dream of a snake warned of betrayal. To dream of flying hinted at divine favor. Here are some superstitions of Roman dreams. A dream dreamt after midnight was truer than one dreamt before. Dreams that came during first sleep were thought muddled, influenced by the day's noise. But dreams of the second sleep, when the night was deeper and the city quieter, were considered gifts of the gods. If you dreamed of the dead, it was believed their souls were reaching out, either for offerings or to warn you of something to come. Some households placed sprigs of laurel or rosemary under pillows, believing these herbs kept nightmares at bay. Others set small lamps burning through the night to give the soul light as it wandered. One story told in the streets was of Marcia, the wife of a baker. She dreamt that her husband stood outside their shop with a great black bird perched on his shoulder, its wings stretched wide, blotting out the sun. When she awoke, she begged him not to light the oven that day. But he laughed. Business waited for no dream. He stoked the fire, and before long, a spark leapt onto the thatch roof. By the time neighbors rushed to help, the shop was ruined. Afterward, people said the blackbird was no bird at all, but a messenger of the gods, warning of fire. Since then, it was whispered among bakers, if a bird appears in a dream, heed it well, for your ovens may burn more than bread. Not only the common people, but emperors themselves placed great weight on dreams. Julius Caesar was said to have ignored warnings given in visions before the Ides of March and the tale of his wife Calpurnia's dream of his statue bleeding from 100 wounds became legend. Soldiers on campaign often dreamt of their families or of victory and defeat. A dream of broken weapons was taken as an ill omen. A dream of marching under a bright sun promised triumph. Some commanders delayed battles based on visions their men had reported, for in the Roman mind, dreams could sway the course of history. Nightmares were thought to be more than simple fears. Some believed they were caused by spirits known as the incubi, beings that sat upon the chest as one slept, pressing down until breath grew shallow and terrifying visions took hold. Others said nightmares came when a sleeper left no offering for their household gods, who retaliated by sending fearful images. Parents sometimes told children that a small mischievous spirit called a noctivagus, a wanderer of the night, slipped through keyholes to tangle dreams, making them sour and strange. To ward them off, children were given amulets shaped like tiny hands or phalluses, believed to drive away evil. It is told of a soldier named Marcus, stationed far from Rome, who awoke one night in terror. He dreamed of his mother standing by his bed, weeping, her hands stained with earth. He could still smell the soil clinging to her skin. The next morning, he received a letter. His mother had died and been buried the very night of his vision. His comrades swore it was proof that the souls of the dead could cross the distance between worlds, visiting in dreams to say their final farewells. For years afterward, Marcus poured a libation of wine before sleep, whispering, "Let those I love come to me kindly, not in sorrow." In the Roman night, dreams were not idle playthings of the mind, but maps, warnings, blessings, or curses. The wealthy sought interpreters. The poor whispered their visions to neighbors, and children repeated theirs as though they were fairy tales. For in the hush between first and second sleep, the Romans believed the gods leaned close, pressing their lips against the veil of slumber, sending fragments of truth wrapped in the language of dreams. And so, as the Roman night draws to its quiet end, the city begins to shift once more. The taverns fall silent, lamps burn low, and even the watchmen grow weary in their patrols. Rome, which never fully sleeps, still finds moments of rest before the coming dawn. The wealthy lie in their cushioned chambers, lulled by the flicker of lamplight and the hush of servants' footsteps. The poor curl together in crowded insulae, the creak of beams above them like the lullaby of the city itself. And between them all, the same moon, the same stars, the same soft veil of night. Dreams drift across every threshold. Some dreams of fortune, some of fear, others simply of the day's labors returning in strange, wandering shapes. But in each dream, Romans found connection to the gods, to their ancestors, to the mysteries of the world unseen. The streets grow still, the fountains murmur gently, and a soft breeze curls between the marble columns and wooden doors. In that quiet, one can almost imagine the city breathing, an ancient rhythm of toil and rest, of noise and silence, of life stretching on through centuries. And perhaps, if you close your eyes, you too can hear it, the echo of footsteps on stone, the hush of water in the fountains, the whisper of wind through tiled roofs, the same sounds that lulled countless souls into sleep long ago. So let your thoughts drift now, as theirs once did. Let the stories of ancient Rome dissolve into the hush of the present moment, the city of emperors and merchants, soldiers and dreamers, fades gently into shadow, leaving only calm and stillness and the promise of rest. And before you drift fully into sleep, I'd like to leave you with a small reminder. If you enjoyed this journey into the nights of ancient Rome, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more relaxing history stories. And if you're still awake, let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Rest well, and I'll see you in the next story.